member. It is beautiful to see you here. I'm very excited that for the first time we are now able to offer continuing education credits for those of you who are pediatric clinicians. Courageous Parents Network will always be first and foremost for parents, by parents, for parents. But we have learned in a way that has been beautiful to see that so much of what we offer and the experience of parents is really valuable to clinicians. And we have been, because you guys value the parent voice and you learn so much from parents. And it has been gratifying to see that. And we've also been gratified uh, to have been able to partner with fabulous clinicians and researchers like Jessika tonight, and therefore you will also be you will be learning from, research and the evidence. So you're just not taking our parental word for it. You will be seeing what the research also shows. So thank you. Please, if you have chats, you want to put questions or comments, please put it in the chat. We will be opening it up to people to ask their questions after at about a little quarter to the top of the hour, so about 45 minutes in. But we'll begin with introductions of our guests, our topic, and then Jessika to McKenzie to our guest parents, Kaitin and Angie. But before we even begin, here is what I want to say about this topic of meaning making and legacy. My daughter Cameron died 24 years ago. And it is true that in the aftermath of her life, I started Courageous Parents Network. And I did a few things before that. And people would say to me, "Oh, Courageous Parents Network is Cameron's legacy." And it was, and it is, but I didn't really love hearing that from other people. And I think it's because I've been thinking about this. I think it's because, for me at least, the notion of legacy and the legacy of my daughter's life and the life that she brought into our lives and the lives we've lived after is very personal to me and my family. And so even though people mean it generously and kindly, it I realized it didn't really work for me to have people tell me what was Cameron's legacy. So I'm just putting that out there. I've also, tonight you're going to be hearing about legacy in a lot of different ways, the formal ways and informal ways we make meaning and infuse legacy activities in hospital, at home, internal and external. So we're going to cover a lot of ground thanks to our guests. And we will begin with quick introductions. We'll do Jessika, then McKenzie, then Kaitin, and then Angie, and then we'll pass it over to Jessika to show the research.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessika Boles. I am a child life specialist by background, and I am an assistant professor of practice at Vanderbilt University in Nashville.
Thank you, Jessika.
Hi, I'm McKenzie Johnson. I'm the executive director at Soulumination, which is a nonprofit based in Seattle, Washington, serving Washington State, and we provide professional photos to families facing life-threatening conditions.
Thank you, McKenzie. Kaitin.
Hi, I'm Kaitin. I'm Roman's mom. I love any chance I can get to introduce myself that way. He was funny and snarky, and he loved ducks and trees. He had severe hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, and he passed away in 2022 when he was 5 years old. CPN invited me to speak after my blog piece about making memories, and I'm back in school for a career change, which I think is sometimes common as part of legacy and after that sort of thing happens for clinical social work at Boston University.
And Angie.
I am Angie Sutphen, and I'm Charlotte's mom. She did not have a diagnosis. It was both mitochondrial and lysosomal, so she lived her life on a ventilator. I have been involved with Soulumination almost since its very beginning. And so I've been really gifted with our photographs as a way to have a lot of legacy work done. Yeah.
Thank you, Angie. All right, Jessica, take it away. Please share your screen.
Have a few little slides to get us started. Have you ever wondered what it means to leave a legacy? I mean, when I was 5 years old, this was something that I wondered about. Other kids were worried about Barbies or Power Rangers or all those, sort of things of the times. But I remember being a little girl and wondering about what that word meant. I heard it because I had people in my life who had serious illness. I heard it on TV. I heard it at church. I heard it in lots of different contexts. And I just thought that was such an interesting word. And I sort of kept it in my vocabulary, experienced it in different ways throughout life. And I never really thought that I would grow up to be a clinician who would work around legacy or even become a researcher who would literally act on that question for years and years. So I'm so surprised and honored to be able to talk about the little bit that I've gathered today. I do want to say, I know I'm a researcher, and I think sometimes there's this idea that researchers are experts in something, right? I don't know that I'm an expert in research or in legacy as a researcher. I think I'm just someone who's put a lot of time into it. I think the real experts are all of the people that have taken the time to talk with me about what legacy means to them. So I hope that what I'm presenting today doesn't come across as what I know, because what I've gathered is only a product of what folks in the community have felt like sharing with me. So when you think about the word legacy, maybe it's these things that pop up on the internet. Maybe it's the name of a shopping center. Maybe it's a movie. Maybe it's a Subaru. Maybe it's a community health center, a smokehouse, a football team, an arena football team. The word legacy gets thrown around a lot, right? We hear it in sort of our everyday vernacular. But what is it? What does it mean? For me, I'm used to seeing it as a child life specialist. But in my personal life, I've always kind of thought of legacy as these sorts of things, like the lace that my grandmother tatted and left behind for our family, or photographs that sort of embodied our family line or our personality, the little heirlooms that got passed from one generation to the next, like this petrified wood pendant. I had a great grandfather who was very into petrified wood. Apparently, there's a lot of things you can make with petrified wood. I even have a newspaper article about him and his petrified wood club. Like, who would have thought? Or personality, like my favorite picture of my great grandmother here, like telling somebody off in like the 1970s, early 80s, right? Personality, attitude. Maybe that's a part of your legacy. The way I usually saw it in healthcare, though, as a child life specialist, was a plaster hand mold, right? Maybe this looks familiar to some of you who have had a child in the hospital or been in the hospital or known somebody who's been in the hospital. This plaster hand mold is a way of recognizing something that's incredibly unique to every child, right? Every child, every person has a unique handprint, a unique fingerprint that will never ever be the same as anyone else's, right? It's the one of the physical things that is entirely incredibly unique that we can externally see, that we can document, right? But I'll never forget when I've worked with children who did not want to make this, or families who did not like this or did not find this meaningful, right? I remember working with a child life colleague who was literally crying in a meeting because a teenager did not want to make this. He had end stage cancer and he did not want to make this. He did not like arts and crafts, as he said it. And I remember her concern being that if he did not make this, what would happen to his legacy? Such an interesting question, right? What does happen to your legacy? Is this thing the legacy? Is it the only way that we can think about legacy? So ta-da, a research agenda is born for me. So I started out close to home. I worked on a study with my doctoral advisor. We had both recently lost a grandmother. We did a series of interviews with one another, just talking about our grandmothers and what we learned from them. We looked through each other's old artifacts. We talked about their personalities, the things we remembered. And in one of the interviews, I remember asking her, what do you hope the world might be doing one day after you die? What might be the best case scenario? And she said, I would want somebody to remember how I taught them to take the strings off of celery before you cook it. I definitely made a gross face because I don't like celery. And I said, why that? And she said, because those are the things that I remember about my grandmother. And we had this really insightful conversation about the way our grandmothers smelled, or the way my grandmother used to hide vodka in her Slim Fast, right? Like the little things that nobody else would ever know. But those were the things that we remembered. It wasn't necessarily anything that they made or, intentionally did for the purposes of their legacy. It was just those little moments. So then I started thinking about it more in healthcare, right? Like if this is what I'm seeing all the time in the work that I do as a child life specialist, are we asking questions around what we're doing with regards to legacy? Are we really taking the time to figure out what legacy means to children and families? And are we doing the right best thing for each family in that way? Well, we knew from research that most children's hospitals in the country were offering what they called legacy services. And when you asked them what those were, they would tell you that it was offering these plaster hand molds or foot molds, painted hand or footprints. So again, acknowledging that very special, very unique essence of the child, preserving special items like locks of hair, hospital bracelets, special blankets, teddy bears, things like that belong to the child, or creating all kinds of other keepsakes, right? Things that could be made in the moment to reflect who that child was. But nothing talked about what patients and families and children and families and healthcare teams thought legacy was. These things were just deemed as legacy services. So, given my 5-year-old wonderings, I had to go back to that question of what does legacy mean before we start thinking about how we honor that legacy. So that's been my research for the past 5, 6, 7 years to really explore what the legacy perceptions and experiences are of all these different groups of people. How do they understand legacy? How do they describe it? What experiences in their life have led them to this definition? We started with healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, child life specialists, social workers, respiratory therapists, PT, OT, speech, everybody who works in a healthcare setting. What does legacy mean to them? Then we talked to parents of children who are actively hospitalized. So parents who had an infant in the cardiac ICU, all the way to parents who had a child admitted for surgical observation after a major surgery. Any parent who had a child in the hospital, what did they have to say about what legacy was? Then we talked to actual hospitalized children themselves as young as 6, and they could actually tell us what they thought legacy was. They had some really insightful things to say. Then we started talking to parents who had experienced loss, because that was the context in which these legacy interventions were usually offered. So we spoke to bereaved parents who lost a child over the age of 1 and under the age of 19. Then we talked to parents who experienced infant or perinatal loss, knowing that that's a unique type of loss and that often those parents didn't get an opportunity to take their child home and sort of have that accumulation of experiences. Recently, we just finished a study with parents of children with medical complexity, knowing that children with medical complexity sometimes can't communicate in the same way, or maybe don't experience the world in the same way, and our world is not necessarily structured to meet their needs in the same way. So how do parents think about their legacy? And now we're working on children who are receiving palliative care. How do they think about legacy? And families who have lost someone by suicide. So the way we do this is we do these semi-structured interviews. They feel like a conversation. We give lots of flexibility. So if people want to stop or don't want to answer questions, they can at any point in time and for any reason. We ask between 5 and 7 questions. The very first one being, how would you define the word legacy for you and your family? Right? That's the heart of what we want to know. What experiences in your life have made you think about this? What sources of information do you draw on? How do you feel when you hear the word legacy? If we're talking about a child, how do you describe your child's legacy? What things have people done in the hospital or in your family, in your community to help honor your child's legacy? What do people do now to honor that legacy? How has your child's legacy impacted how you think about the word legacy? And so what we've come to is these sort of different descriptions by group of what legacy means. So we have a range of things, from providers talking about legacy as something that just happens at the end of life and that's very tangible, right? The creation of the hand mold or the handprint, and something that recognizes a child's impact and relationships and endures across generations, to the very different end of the spectrum with bereaved parents talking about how legacy is not necessarily tangible. It's experiential. It's something you feel, you experience. It's relationships. It's transformative. It's cultural. It's spiritual. It's individual for every person. It's impactful to you. It's impactful to your community. And you see it as generational as well, long lasting. And then families of children with medical complexity, their child is still alive, right? So they think about their child's active legacy as personhood, who they are, their unique person, who is existing and defying the expectations that the medical community maybe had for them. Just the fact that they're still here and then doing the things that they are is part of their legacy. And by being here, they're advocating for the disability community and having an impact on future children and families who will live with similar conditions or have similar needs. So see a wide range of what legacy can be. But when we synthesize all of these together, what we've come to is sort of this general definition, that legacy is an enduring representation of the self, so representation of the person, which includes qualities, experiences, effects, and relationships that are built and bestowed across generations. Whether they're concrete or intangible, so can be either, intentional or serendipitous, planned or unplanned, legacies are avenues of connection, education, inspiration, or transformation. They accomplish those things for us. They help us feel connected. They help us pass our wisdom. They help us feel inspired or motivated. And they transform from generation to generation the ideals that we hold and the things that we strive to do. So what we've really learned, I think, from this research so far is that something that I think we sort of deeply knew, but maybe didn't know how to say out loud. And that's that the complex relationships and memories and experiences of a person, of a child, even a freshly born infant, right? You can't capture those necessarily in a single item or a single project. You can absolutely reflect parts of who they are, and those things can have very deep meaning. But the legacy itself is very much a process, right? It's those shared things that happen in that community of the family. And the way we honor that in and outside of the hospital can have a big impact on how kids, families, communities cope with those changes and transitions or losses. For some people, a legacy can be a very sensory experience, right? The way a laugh sounds, the warmth of a hug, a memory that just feels so real in your brain, something that you still very much hope for, a stuffed animal in your hand. I talked to a dad one time who kept a square of his baby's blanket in his pocket because he didn't want to talk to other people about his baby, but he wanted to feel his baby there, right? We all have different things that we can do to stay connected to that legacy, to that person. It can be so many different things, but honoring legacy then really must be as unique as the legacies that we hope to represent. What we don't want to do is define, kind of like Blythe said, we don't want to define for other people what their child's legacy is and how it needs to be recorded, but rather think in terms of possibilities and ways that we can openly honor who that child is and what they've shared with their family. So thanks so much for letting me get us started with that little bit of the conversation. Now I'm going to pass it over to McKenzie to talk about her work with Soulumination.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, that was so great to hear your research and perspective, especially I'm going to speak from like this our organization's point of view, which is legacy photography, and I'm going to share my screen here for a second.
Mhm.
Let's see. Okay, awesome. So yeah, we're Soulumination. We provide child legacy and parent legacy photographic services. We've been doing this for 20 years, which is pretty incredible. And I think a lot of people, when they hear the word legacy, think of their grandparents or a will or a trust. And for us, legacy is the long-lasting impact of particular events or actions that took place in a person's life. For us, legacy isn't the end or the after. We're building it every single day with every decision we make, and particularly every human interaction we have on a daily basis is building that legacy. And we hope as an organization that the service we provide is just a little piece of the family's legacy moving forward. So, like I said, for the last 20 years, we've been serving families in Washington State who have children facing life-threatening conditions. We provide a professional photo session, an online gallery of images, and custom legacy gifts free of charge. We work with children's hospitals, Ronald McDonald houses, providers all over the state. And so what we hope for our families that we serve is that our photos and keepsakes that we make for them can solidify their memory of that moment when they're usually focused on survival every day. We know memory is untrustworthy at the best of times. And then you put a family in a traumatic situation, and I can't even imagine. I have had a mother, say to us, I got the pictures and I didn't even remember that moment or that was there or anything. And so we're really hoping that we can step in and solidify those pieces for the families for the future. I always say, like, what are we left of any situation, of any moment in our life? It's really our memory of that moment or of that person. So hopefully these can be some tangible things that the family can carry on and be part of their legacy for generations. And also, if it's too painful, it can stay in a drawer. I really try not to say to families how they should use our photos or what we create for them. That is completely up to the family. I don't like to speak for families. I like to give them enough that they don't have to think about printing the photos or anything like that. And they can have just enough pieces to start that legacy for themselves. And in the vein of not speaking for families, I'd just like to share a quote from a family. The pictures from Soulumination are incredibly precious and invaluable, helping us remember and process that season. They also allow us to honor his memory by including his image in our displayed family pictures at home, even though we were never able to bring him home from the hospital.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and so when I think about legacy, personally, doing this work, my advice would be don't wait. Don't wait for the perfect time to make those memories, to have the pictures taken. It's all the time. There's never a perfect time. And legacy for us is continually happening all around us. So we are so honored to do this work and be here tonight, and I can't wait to finish the rest of the conversation with everyone.
Thank you, McKenzie. And I have seen photos that Soulumination has taken of families, and they are absolutely beautiful. I mean, you can sort of see a little bit of it here. You can see some of them here. Kaitin, you have been thinking about this a lot on your journey, everything you learned with Roman during his life. So please,
Yeah.
please share how you've been thinking about it.
Yeah, I can share a little bit. First, Mackenzie, those photos are beautiful, and it reminded me, I never got a chance to do the big photo shoot. My dad's an artist though, so I did throw up some sketches that he did. I feel like if you have that in your family, like people have little talents or anything, it kind of personalizes those mementos when you can. When I was looking at Jessica's research in the beginning, one thing that stood out to me was that question of how do you feel when you think about making your child's legacy or making sure that they have a legacy. And when he was still here, I remember that feeling like a pressure. I felt pressure to make it grand. And I did I broke it down into these 3 categories of when I was trying to decipher what it really meant for me just now. There is the list of what I actively did during that time, which is the hand molds, the heartbeat, the lock of hair, pictures, that sort of thing, and kind of actively trying to make those memories in places around the cities and that sort of thing. And then I veered off that because that felt like things, and I made a list of things that Roman did, which was just being him, of loving ducks and having fabulous swoopy hair, and just being himself. And that led me to the 3rd category, which was this chain reaction of Roman just being Roman, which led to his brother noticing how Roman could maneuver through all the buildings that we go in now, and he's in 5th grade. Going back to school, but also his teacher at school and his OT getting duck tattoos on their ankles. And so they remember what it's like to teach kids like him, and all those things, that ripple effect. And I think the legacy piece that I noticed from kind of jotting those notes down was just the noticing and the sharing, and the legacy kind of takes care of itself. And while I would grab all of those items if my house was on fire and run so fast, it isn't just that. It's a lot more that I wasn't solely responsible for. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I love that categorization. And we'll come back to that. Angie, you did all of this too.
Yes. What everybody has shared is all absolutely so true. And I love you so much, McKenzie. Our photos mean everything to us. And that is for me, they are around our home. When I fly, I always keep my little wallet photos in my pocket, when I travel. But really, legacy for me has been about our experience with her, with Charlotte. We made showering her like this whole family event. We rolled her into the shower and we all bathed her together, and it was like a fruit salad smell in there with all the different shampoos and conditioners and soaps, and it was fragrant, and it was so relaxing for her, and tactile and enjoyable and beautiful and restful and relaxing. And then we all brought her back out to the bed and lotioned her up and changed all her tubing and, every bedding, and picked her a really beautiful outfit and put fruity lip gloss on her lips. I mean, everything was just this beautiful experience. And so then by that, now for us, like, everybody's always talking about spa time, cha-cha spa. We all really make sure we enjoy our own showers and spa times, because it's this homage, this respect and love to her, that we do good self-care and take the time to just feel her and enjoy that. And we used to have potlucks. We had this huge community outpouring of love, because it does take a village to have a child like that. And so people, caregivers, neighborhood people, our family and friends, everybody would come, because we couldn't go anywhere, and come and visit us and see her and give love and share food. And that was a part of our life for 8.5 years, and we still do these potlucks now. So that is a tradition that we carry forward, that was born of her love and her drawing community. And this child was so loved, and it was just this amazing experience, being her mother. And then lastly, I think for me, carrying her legacy forward is looking for opportunities in our community now to help Soulumination, help other parents who are going through, this path of having a sick child, or a child who is maybe, closer to leaving this planet and they need support, or has lost a child and needs a friend and a shoulder and an ear, you know, being available for that. Just looking for ways to take what Charlotte gave me and use it in a way that is loving and makes sense, and can, provide somebody else some support.
Mm. That's very beautiful, Angie. And listening to Kaitin and Angie talk about the 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 way they think about the legacy, Roman's legacy and Charlotte's legacy, in both cases, they said that it has evolved over time and it's shape shifted. And it isn't that what it was is no longer, it's that it's also become something else. And that is sort of the power of time and the power of love and the power of maintaining connection. Like, you maintain connection and this is what happens, or this is what happens with which helps you maintain connection. And also just sort of like the child that is gonna show up in different ways later. So for parents whose children are living, if they're worried about their child's legacy, if it's likely that their child is going to die during the adult's life, then to some extent, it's like, just have faith that your child's light is going to find a way to be in your life, that in a way that you will experience it as legacy, which on one hand is a beautiful thing, but on the other hand might be hard to believe until you've experienced it. And so I wonder, Jessika, like, do you have parents say, will my child leave a legacy? Or how do I, like, do parents express a concern or anxiety about it? Kaitin touched on it a little bit, that she felt pressure. And if so, I guess my question for both Jessika and McKenzie is, what would you say to a parent who's worried about it? And then to Kaitin and Angie, what would you say to a parent who's worried about it? And how can clinicians and family members support and remove that worry as much as possible?
I've worked with probably 1,000 families who've lost a child, probably at this point in my career. And I have never heard a family afraid that their child hasn't left a legacy, or afraid that their child's legacy won't be recognized. What I have heard is sometimes parents have felt like the way that legacy is treated or honored in the hospital is maybe less than the span of what their child's legacy is to them. Like, I'm thinking of this one particular girl that I worked with. She was 13. She had spina bifida. She was very popular with her friends at her school. She was on social media and had a little hashtag. Everybody knew about her. And as she was approaching the end of life, one of the physicians I worked with continued to refer me back to this family, saying, we need to do the handprints, we need to do the hand molds. I had already talked about those with the family, and it wasn't something they were interested in, but I went by one more time just to say, hey, the doctor said you might be interested in these things. I just wanted to check one more time. And I had a square canvas in my hand that had an example of sort of what the hand or feet prints look like. And this mom and I had a great relationship. And she looked at me, she said, honey, her legacy is so much bigger than anything you can put on that square right there. And I was like, you're absolutely right, right? Like, I loved that. I've seen a few instances like that where people have said, okay, it's time to do the legacy activities or do legacy building. And families have almost felt like, not necessarily offended, but just like, that's it. Like, you think that thing is all that my child's legacy is. Like, if only you knew the history of all that we've been through and the way that they snore at night and the way they do this and that, right? Like, that's my kid's legacy. So I've been trying to work really hard with staff, especially on just changing the way that we have that conversation and the way we talk about that word, and not equating the word with an item, right? Because even that beautiful plaster hand mold, like, we can see the beauty of the child's hand, but it really can't capture the entirety of everything that a parent, a sibling, a community member would describe as that child's legacy. I have also heard from parents, though, in the past that they worry about grand gestures, right? Thinking they need to do grand things to make the most of their time with their child. But a psychologist that I worked with, we talked a lot about sort of the idea of special time, or even just like focused present time with your child. Like, that really is sort of the meat of it. Like, as Kaitin said earlier, I really loved, it's noticing and sharing, and the legacy takes care of itself, right?
Mhm.
It's not a big grand thing. It's just being present in the moment and noticing and sharing. So I really love that reframe.
Mm. Thank you. McKenzie, do you?
I always have some thoughts on this. I think it is just overall such a hard word and everyone thinks of it differently. I never want, from my perspective, I never want people to feel pressured to do something. I always want it to be an option. And then for, it's attraction rather than promotion. For us, and really since providers are really the one offering our services, we work with them on like how to present the options. And for me, it's more letting the work speak for itself. And then also, like I mentioned when I was talking, like not waiting for that perfect time. I mean, our photos and the children are beautiful to me, no matter what space they're in. And I think it comes through in all of these, like a lot of parents don't want tubes or we can't see the full face, and I always just want them to have them no matter what. So for me it's like not taking the pressure away, and then also that they're going to be beautiful photos and work, no matter what condition, honestly, that the state that the child is in, and that is part of the journey anyways. So
I'm I'm reminded listening to you that a good friend of ours, um, as a gift when Cameron was clearly approaching the end of her life and her younger sister was born, gave us the gift of a photography session with her great uncle who was a professional photographer. And he came to our house, and every single photograph that he took is terrible. I mean, he was a great photographer, but we looked terrible. The children's faces, they look like we all look wretched. And I love these
I was
photographs.
gonna say, but do you love them?
I love them because they remind me of the day that we were having, which was not a day for photographs, and they just make me giggle. So they're not on my mantle, but they are close at hand and they make me happy.
Well, and I always say, I mean, it's about the connection. Like it's about seeing the love
Yeah.
in the photos.
Yes.
I love that.
Uh, Kaitin and Angie, do you want to add anything to this?
Sure, I can say a little something. I kind of already talked about it a little bit, but that I think potentially for me, because my son was so medically complex and did have a hard time communicating, and he was um, very medically fragile, so I couldn't. He had connections with his team, but he didn't get to go out in the world as much as I would have liked. So I wish more people knew about him. And so knowing that when I knew that his life was going to be shortened, that was another layer of it for me, of making sure that, oh my goodness, everyone in my little sphere who got to experience him so deeply is so impacted, and now that it's shortened and he's not here anymore, can I push that out? And when you were talking about legacy kind of shape shifting over time, that really resonated with me. I feel like watching his his ripple effect grow even after he's no longer here has been
Mm,
really healing for me,
mm,
and
mm,
just experiencing his legacy.
mm, mm. Yeah. Angie?
I will just say that early on, photographs were really important to me. I saw Lynette on a news piece, and I reached out and got a hold of her and told her my um, terrible story about getting, I don't know if it was Sears or Penny's or somewhere. I tried to take Charlotte, and she kept falling over because she had no muscle tone. And then shortly after, she became vent dependent. And when I saw that story about Lynette, I just knew she could take pictures of Charlotte. So no matter what, tubing, all the things, I knew she could capture Charlotte. And she came to the house, and her older sister Maddie decided to stay home. And I just had these huge hopes that I would get these incredible pictures, and what you hope for and what you get are always different, right? But Charlotte ended up sleeping through the whole damn thing, but it is truly an amazing. I mean, I can feel her hair in these pictures, which is so amazing because she had the most amazing hair, and Maddie was so sweet, and they are perfect. They are completely perfect. This is still, I think, the most captures absolutely. That's the most peaceful I ever saw Charlotte, because that is not how her life was. But Maddie just held her and laid next to her, and it was meeting Lynette and doing that photo shoot and having those moments with these two girls together was absolutely one of the most amazing days ever. And then, later on, little things like when she lost her first front tooth, I don't do teeth, and I almost like lost my cool. And the nurse got it out because I was afraid it was going to go right down her little throat or something. And I had that tooth cast in silver, and I wore it around my neck because it was like a normal thing for a person to lose a tooth. And she looked really cute without her little tooth. And it to me was like just a normal everyday thing that kids do. They lose a tooth. And it just, I don't know. It was meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, these these crazy things.
Oh, that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. Where's the tooth now?
It's on a necklace. I actually have her birthday, her name on one side, Charlotte Fiona, a silver thing, and on the back it has her birthday, and then it has her birthstones with a little tiny tooth.
Mm,
It's really cool.
that's so nice.
Yeah.
Well, we are going to open it up for questions now, and I see one. You can put your questions into the chat. That's probably the best because we're enough people here that it's probably unwieldy. Naomi is asking, what suggestions do any of you have for families Oh, yes. So if you are not in Washington State and cannot have easy access to Soulumination, are there other photography people, photographers, I should say, who do this beautiful work also?
There are other organizations across the country. I can get a list to you guys out after this. I wouldn't say it's in every state, but also if you're working with a medical provider, I think along with those legacy services, a lot of times photography will be in there. Um, but also like y- these things are really great now. Like, don't be afraid to just capture the moment, have a friend capture moments. I think if you have a friend that's a photographer, ask to take pictures, just
Yes.
really capitalize on I'm sure AI can come. No, I'm just kidding. But like um yeah, I think use the resources you have around you. And most people know a photographer if you can afford one, or if you can't, I think your hospital and your providers might be able to set you up also.
Thank you. And we'll send out that list in the follow-up email. We'll send out a list of what McKenzie sends us. Joan, I think you're asking about the parent putting a tattoo on their own person of the related to their child. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. So
I've
anybody?
actually seen that many
I,
times.
I have one.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
One of the things in the hospital that I've had some families ask is sometimes we do ink prints of like hand and feet. And I've had parents tell me that for tattoo artists, like that's the better way to do it versus painted handprints or, any other type. So I have done that before, and I've worked with a lot of families who have gone on to get tattoos. My friend Carlos actually did a really cool research study where he talked to people all over the country who got memorial tattoos in honor of something. And it for a lot of people was a really meaningful way to carry someone with them and have that story to tell about that person.
I would like, my daughter, uh, we have an older daughter, Maddie, and there was a lot of, she went through a lot when we lost Charlotte. So one of the things we did that was a part of her healing process is my husband and Maddie and I all got tattoos together when she turned 18. We all got Charlotte tattoos together. So it was a really cool thing to do together.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's very cool. Um, I think I'm looking at Andy's question. I'm gonna sort of, I don't know if this is what he meant or if this is my translation, but interpretation. But when a child dies in the hospital or who has recently been hospitalized, are there things that the team can do to offer, I mean, after to do or bring that is in the scope of legacy, or like this would it be appropriate to say, like this is how your child impacted me. I feel their presence in the world in this fashion. Kaitin, you're nodding your head. Was this done for you?
It, I had some cards, which is fantastic. And just knowing that providers were thinking of us was really impactful for me. But I think, um, I saw Donnell on the call, but I am lucky enough to be involved with a little bit with the University of Minnesota's. They have the simulation center there has a pediatric end of life conversations workshop, and I've had some providers at that workshop ask if it's appropriate or if that would be welcome. I'm sure it's different for other people, but I feel like that is maybe some of the best kind of legacy. I was having a conversation with my friend Laura about her child who died in the NICU, and that was some of the things that she considered legacy was the conversations she had with the nurse and those relationships that happened because of the stay at the NICU. And so I think hearing it told back to you is really impactful and healing.
I love that. I love that. I had I that's making me think of something that I did after my daughter Cameron died. I decided to reach out to her home care nurses and her primary care doctor and our grief counselor and tell them that what I was beginning to think my daughter's legacy was. I didn't wait. I was like, I read a book. There was this book that I read. It was a collection of essays by Annie Lamott and called I think it was Traveling Mercies. And then I had this great photograph of my daughter and I had it framed and I was like, here, blah, 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 blah. This is where I currently am with my daughter's legacy, and now you've got it too. Or like hold it with me, basically, I think is what I was saying is hold it with me. So I didn't wait. I gave it to them and just trusted, hoped that in the that they were gonna hold it with me.
That.
Yeah.
But
Angie?
Um, well, Charlotte died at home, but 2 years ago, I was at Children's on another child's care team, and she passed in the hospital, and they did an amazing job. They had a book that all of her care team, over about 4 days, came in and visited her and had closure, signed her book, asked if there was anything that they could do with her or with her mother. And they did a lot of stuff. They did hands and feet, and they did finger painting. Um, she handed out things of hers that people wanted to have. It was beautiful. I mean, it was absolutely an amazing thing to be a part of. And then everybody was invited to be on the rooftop when her ventilator was removed, and it was a large crowd that were there with us when we, let her go. And I just, I don't think I felt like she was so beautifully supported. I just felt like it was really an amazing effort to make sure she was well supported. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds very beautiful. And what what's so striking, well, it's not really striking, it's just what comes up again and again for me is that people, it is the rare person who doesn't respond to these moments. And if you open the door, they will come in, the literal door, the proverbial door, and they will help you do it and they will feel it with you. And then that becomes something unto itself.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this question from I think okay, we have it. What about in the NICU, Jessica? Families who are maybe afraid to hold their baby because their baby's so little, there's all this stuff, and maybe,
Yeah. So there's lots of ways that you can still have meaningful interaction with your baby. I mean, sometimes it's just helping parents understand, right? Like, what does this wire do? What does this tube do? Like, how well connected is it, right? So sort of helping them understand like how safe it is or is not to hold their baby if that's an option. There might be other ways that they feel comfortable engaging. Maybe they don't feel comfortable picking up their baby, but maybe they feel comfortable rubbing their little feet or rubbing their little hands or
Mm.
patting their head, right? Having that sort of like spa time like Angie had with Charlotte, right? It's a little cha-cha spa, right? But in the research that we've done with families who've experienced infant or perinatal loss, most of those babies either died at birth or had a short NICU stay and passed away shortly after that. And when we talked to those families about their baby's legacy, they primarily talked about finding out they were pregnant and the excitement around planning for baby and picking names and choosing a nursery theme, or planning for, the day of arrival if that was something that was scheduled, or even when their baby was in the hospital, just thinking about, the days that they had where it was a calm day, or the blanket that they chose to put in the crib with them most often, or how the day that they were born was the same day as great grandmother's birthday. Like, there's so many ways that they still found meaning in who their baby was, even if their life was short and sort of hospital bound. So I think you can definitely like reframe and educate about some of those tubes and wires to help them feel more comfortable, but also normalize that there's lots of different ways that you can connect and bond with your baby and feel their legacy and create it while they're there.
I wonder if there is another word or other words other than legacy. Have parents offered other words, Jessica? Because legacy can feel, I mean, we know what we now know what we mean, thanks to this conversation, but are there any that are a little less onerous, pressureful, confused with a Subaru or sports team, but like a little more accessible for the person who might not, for the person for whom legacy feels too abstract or too pressure filled?
Yeah. So in all of our studies, we specifically ask, what does legacy mean to you? Right. So that
Mhm.
skews it a little bit. But in clinical practice, working with families, I sort of read the tone of, the room and what people are saying. There was a great question in the chat about, how do you bring it up if a family's not quite there yet, thinking about the end of life? Well, legacy doesn't have to be, about the end of life. When I worked with teenagers with end stage cancer, we would talk about how, sometimes being here, there's lots of ups and downs in your treatment. Some people like to think about how to document those, right? Like, how do you keep track of the good days and the bad days? Like, what are the ways that you tell your story? Like, telling your story can be a good way to talk about that.
Love that.
Making memories, most people sort of understand that concept. Connecting, staying connected to each other, spending time with each other. I mean, really, those concepts are interchangeable because they're part of legacy. So even if you don't give it that formal heading of legacy, you're still getting at what legacy is, which is that representation of the self, those connections, those shared experiences that are so transformative.
I love that. McKenzie, Kaitin, Angie, any of you want to say anything else before we sign off about this, about the word legacy or the notion or anything? No?
I mean, I think we're all building a piece tonight, sharing these experiences and these words and everything will help build legacies moving forward. So it's
Yeah,
great to be in this room.
yeah,
I do like story as well, telling your story.
yeah,
Yeah.
me too. All right, well, on behalf of Courageous Parents Network, a special thanks to Jessika, McKenzie, Kaitin, and Angie for joining us tonight and helping frame this and sharing their professional expertise, their hard-earned, beautiful wisdom as clinicians, photographers, and parents. And to all of you who showed up to listen so beautifully, ask questions, learn, and take this into your own life as a parent or into your practice as a clinician. Thank you so very much. I will now stop recording.